Well, hey, everybody. I'm Eric Waldrop, the owner of Your Next Step Leadership Coaching. And hey, I am here with my friend Ike Patterson. Ike, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Eric. It's good to be here with you, brother.
Good, man. Hey, listen, everybody. We are talking today about how to manage leadership anxiety. I don't know if you have ever felt anxious in your role, weighed down by anxiety, just fear itself in terms of a lot of the decisions that you're having to face, or maybe even the consequences of things that have happened. We want to talk about managing leadership anxiety and just that sense of feeling overwhelmed. And I can't think of anybody better to address this than my friend Ike Patterson. Ike, I'm so glad you're here. Ike, tell us a little bit about some of your history and some of your credentials that give you some credibility to talk about this.
Okay. Well, I've been a pastor for about 47 years now, I think. So in that process of going through my whole life in ministry, I have when I was in graduate school, I've been certified as a psychiatric chaplain, received my LPC, licensed professional counselor license at that time. So I had the rare ability to be able to both pastor churches and be able to counsel. And that's been useful all of my life. So I've done that. I've been a psychiatric chaplain in a mental health hospital, director of outpatient services in a mental health hospital, my own private practice with therapy and counseling, and then became certified as a leadership and life coach through the International Federation of Life Coaches. So just a lifetime of trying to be able to help people and grow and understand myself. That's what I bring to the table.
Dude, I love it. And you're so good at it. And you work with a lot of our staff and a lot of our people here in the context of the Summit Church, where I also serve as the executive pastor, and you do a wonderful, wonderful job at that. Now, I wanted to ask you, from your experience in talking with leaders, working with leaders, what are you or what are maybe the top three things that you feel like make leaders feel overwhelmed in their role?
Yeah, well, our world that we live in is rife with incessant and tumultuous changes. We go through changes all the time. As we're recording this video, we're just coming out of COVID-19 in 2020 that created disconnection, anxiety, uncertainty, job loss all across the country. So, and I think in the months ahead, you'll see some significant times impact where physicians and therapists are trying to help people diagnose their anxiety symptoms from these events. So none of us are exempt from having anxiety and stress. That's been a part of our life. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not be afraid," over and over again. So there's a uniqueness to this struggle, though, for leaders, because they're trying to be successful in directing teams and businesses, their own business, the people that they serve, but they often find themselves overwhelmed with struggles that are unique to a leader. I would say, in answer to your question, there are three things that you see leaders struggle with over and over again that seem to be overwhelming in their life. One is an unwanted identity. Because of the experiences of our past, we all carry around baggage of pain and resentments, situations, failures, losses. And it can lead us to distorted views of our worth and our value. It undermines our vision for our ideal success. We become overwhelmed by urges and compulsions, dysfunctional patterns that lead to destructive thinking about us being inadequate. So that's unwanted identity. We all struggle with it. We desperately try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
And we don't grow and discover some healing in these areas, then it will cause us to limp in our leadership and be ineffective in decisions in our own lives and with others. So There's a tendency, Eric,
Yeah.
when we struggle with unwanted identity, to either do one of four things. Either we pretend, we perform, we please, or we become perfect. We start perfecting.
Mm.
Um, and all of that is because we feel inadequate inside. So we struggle with an unwanted identity first.
Ike, what does somebody need to do to discover or determine if they are operating out of an unwanted identity?
One of the things is to listen to what the people that you're leading may be telling you.
Man, that's good.
Yeah, it's because they are well aware of our own insecurities. Sometimes we're not, but they are. And you may have conversations with people that work for you or report to you as a leader that they will say, hey, I want to be pleasing to you, but I find it very difficult. If you find yourself running up against issues with people, then I would challenge you to look at what am I carrying around that may be destructive to myself, how I view myself or other people.
Yeah.
Um, and so that would be very helpful for you to take an honest evaluation and look at uh, the patterns of the
Yeah.
way you think and some of the things that are a part of your past.
So why do you think more leaders don't do exactly what you just said?
Because we're driven to project an adequacy and a competency about our own leadership, and we don't think it's necessary for us to do hard work of looking back at some of the pain and seeing how it
Mm.
has affected our life. It's all about perception. It's all about, we want to be perceived as adequate and competent in all things.
Yeah.
But it does take some wisdom in looking at your life and evaluating, hey, is this an issue
Yeah.
for me? Do I think of myself in ways that are not fair?
Yeah. Well, and you think about it, we all have carrying around some sort of pain or loss that we've experienced because even take the game of baseball. Every time a player is up at the plate to swing the bat, I mean, gosh, if they just hit it 3 times out of 10, you're considered one of the best in the league.
I
But
heard something the other day about that, Eric, that Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs, and between those home runs, he struck out 1,400 times. So,
wow,
yeah.
if that doesn't put it into perspective, but I love what you said about just, that perception, how we perceive ourselves is so important, and make sure we're operating out of a healthy perception of ourselves and not an unhealthy one. Dude, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Okay, so that's the first one, an unwanted identity. What's the second one?
I would say unrealistic expectations.
Mm,
Whether they're from ourselves or whether they come from other people, they can cripple our leadership. Even the leadership of the most promising leaders, when they're facing unrealistic expectations, it can chip away at important relationships in our lives. It shuts down the goals and
yeah,
plans that we have. It can even steer our lives into unhealthy directions. So
yeah,
we have when we live under the shadow of these unrealistic expectations, we fall short, and we certainly will. That's
hmm,
part of human experience. But we start
yeah.
drawing false conclusions. We cultivate negative feelings, and we act out in destructive ways based on our inability to meet these unrealistic expectations.
I love that. Is there an example of an unrealistic expectation as you've worked with leaders that you maybe hear over and over? Maybe a common unrealistic expectation, or just one from some of your experiences?
Yeah, if let me give you a case here where somebody may say, this project that I've been assigned, I want to do it right. I want to do it adequate. I want to prove that I'm competent. So it must be perfect. Um, it's beyond our ability to ensure perfection because we live in a frail world.
Yeah,
But we have that expectation sometimes, and we can't ensure that perfection. So it
yeah,
won't be perfect.
yeah,
Um, but if it's not perfect, then we tend to conclude that we're not able to be effective, or we're incompetent in some way. That is a very common unrealistic expectation based on how we feel about ourselves and what others may ask us to do.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we tend to think about ourselves based upon the outcome of a project that we are working on.
Yeah, that's the example that I gave you of what it's like to have unrealistic expectations. There are many, many of them
Yeah.
that become unhealthy and distorted
Yeah.
in our lives. I think we have to take an honest evaluation
Yeah.
and ask these three things. Does this expectation help me to be who I want to be? Does it help me go where I want to go? And am I able to hold my core values as the North Star that directs my future if these expectations are a part of my life? If you can ask those things of yourself, that will help you evaluate, is this distorted in some sort of way?
Ike, I love what you said about, am I able to be true to my core values
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of the project that I'm working on, or essentially do I have to become somebody else?
That's right.
I love that, dude. That's so good. Okay, so unwanted identity, unrealistic expectations are the other.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things we know can make us feel overwhelmed in leadership and create stress and anxiety. What's that third one that you know?
This is consistent with almost every leader. I would say it's unrelenting chaos. One of the biggest challenges in leadership is how a leader responds to change and challenges. Because we all do. We have things don't always remain the same like we wish they would. Uh, but a ship has to be steered, and as a
Yeah,
leader, we develop our own leadership style and our own ability to our own vision, leadership vision, and we have to adjust to challenges to have success moving forward, even in
yeah,
difficult times.
yeah.
We all face anxiety and doubts when we have intimidating struggles, but with a leader, um, uh, when we face one difficult challenge after another, it seems an unending pattern of trial and threats. It might seem overwhelming and traumatizing to many leaders. They tend to lose their courage and their bravery as a leader. They tend to distort their abilities and question their self-worth if they are seeing unrelenting change and chaos in their lives. So that would be one of the biggest challenges in helping a leader work through how they're responding to that kind of chaos, those kind of experiences that are tumultuous and bring tribulation in their life.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about, changes and dealing with that compounding effect of change and how it can just deteriorate our courage and our confidence and all those kinds of things. Speaking of what leaders can control in their life, what would you suggest maybe a couple of things that could help leaders um, maintain their positivity and their courage of things that they do have within their control? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, well, we know that we've been given skills and abilities, or we wouldn't be in leadership. And I think when we acknowledge and embrace those skills, at the same time, we have to acknowledge that we're powerless over some changes. So it's learning to be able to be accountable and vulnerable and open uh, to the unrelenting chaos that happens to us.
Mm,
It's pulling up your bootstraps and facing whatever trial that you have. And I think one of the key things here as a leader is, and I just mentioned it a second ago, is to be vulnerable and open with the people that you're leading. They
mhm.
know that you're facing unrelenting chaos. They know that there's changes and challenges. And as a leader, sometimes we fear that we will project ourselves as weak if we're honest and open, but that's very different in practice and in the real world, because when you're authentic and you're real and you're vulnerable with your people,
I love that, Ike. Okay, so let's just imagine ourselves. You're the leader of the team,
Hmm.
and I'm sitting in your leadership team because I'm working alongside of you because you're leading us and you're wanting to create some positive change in the organization. Give me an example. Give us an example. All the leaders watching this, give us an example of what vulnerability means and what it doesn't mean when it comes out of the mouth of a leader.
Yeah, I think we are tempted in many ways to project what we think a leader should be like.
Mm,
And the greatest leader of all has already modeled for us, who is Jesus Christ. He modeled for us how to be a servant leader. He got across his vision, his mission, made it very clear how to provide direction. He equipped his disciples and his followers with the abilities to be able to go out. And so the same way with us, if we are open and honest, and we are encountering whatever trial or struggle our company may be going through, like for instance downsizing,
yeah,
that's something that sometimes is beyond our ability to be able to control, and so we have to furlough or downsize. And that is a huge challenge
yeah,
for a leader to be able to communicate the worth and value of all of those employees, of all of his team members, and at the same time try to maintain profit in the company.
yeah,
That's a huge issue that leaders face all the time.
yeah. Ike, what is appropriate to say in vulnerability and transparency with your team, and what is inappropriate to say?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge that we face as leaders is sometimes we exaggerate one of two things. We exaggerate our power and tend to micromanage people and exploit them for advantage,
Mm,
or we deflate our own ability to please everyone, to be accepted as their leader. And so we have to maintain a healthy balance of that. Um, that's one of the things that I had planned on talking with you about, was the mistakes that sometimes leaders get into when they're encountering anxiety and being overwhelmed. Um, when a leader seeks to lead by power and control,
yeah.
it's usually out of a fear that they consider themselves to be a failure as a leader.
Mm,
Um, and you'll see that leader in with power and control with people tend to reduce the performance of the people beneath them to task lists of do's and don'ts, and confining people to do only their job description.
mm,
You can't think outside of your little box,
yeah.
because it's my need to control the situation, my fear about what's going to happen, that leads this. So the problem with controlling leadership styles is that it stifles creative problem solving from your
Yeah.
employees. It diminishes the sharing of ideas from
Mhm,
team members. People feel miserable about
yeah.
working there. They question their own abilities, and they even have this desire to want to leave your company because they can't have a say in what's going on in their life.
Well, there's that old classic saying that people leave managers, not organizations, right?
Like, that's right.
So, but something you said I think makes a great point is that um, when leaders feel overwhelmed and stressful, sometimes they can transfer that stress to their teams, right?
Yeah.
They
Yes.
can, they can put that on their team, and then their team feels stressed out and overwhelmed, and they don't perform the way that they could, right?
Yeah. Yes. It's about modeling, and like we talked about earlier, about being honest and being open about the challenges that you guys are facing. The
Right.
example that I gave about downsizing.
Yeah.
Um, if a leader is able to present, folks, this is the issue that we're struggling with. We don't have product going out as much as we once had. We are having to take a step back and look at what's going on. And our board of directors has talked about we probably need to downsize and furlough some employees. Be very honest about what their challenges are,
Mm,
um, and step up as a team leader, not just a leader that's directing
Yeah.
all of the decisions.
Okay. So, Ike, I want to ask you to unpack that a little bit. What does a team leader look like at the office?
I think you see some characteristics of team leadership, as in, okay, this is our problem. I want to hear from everybody. What kind of
That's
ideas
good.
you have? It's being creative in problem solving issues, open to their ideas, open to their skills, asking people who have certain abilities to step up and help problem solve some of these issues. You're asking for people on the team to give feedback. At the same time, you're telling them, I'm going to have to make an honest evaluation of everything that you've shared, and I want you to know that I'm going to make the best decision. And it is going to be my
Hmm.
decision,
Yeah.
and because that's what a leader has to do.
Yeah. And,
But
and I would say, and haven't you seen, oh, well, all right. So for me, team leadership, I think is more my style of leadership as well. But sometimes leaders are afraid to use team leadership because what if the team comes up with an idea that the leader doesn't like?
right, you have to be secure in your own self.
Yes.
And be able, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
This is the reason that you see in relationships everybody gets jealous. People have unrealistic expectations about their spouse because they're insecure in their own abilities and their own,
Yeah.
and in their own worth. So if you can grow to the place where you're secure, it's okay about sharing success and being able to say, hey, Bruce brought out a great point here on our executive team, and he had this wonderful idea about being able to deal with things in a different way as we're approaching this COVID crisis.
Yeah.
Um,
You
so
know, I
sharing success.
yeah, I love that, because it really gets back to the living out of that unwanted identity. If you're living out of that unwanted identity, it's going to be hard for you to lead through team leadership because
Yep,
you're going to be intimidated or
yep,
fearful of
yep.
other people maybe looking better than you or having better ideas than you. And I love what Andy Stanley said years ago when he said, you're not the smartest person in the room, you're just the leader."
That's right.
I love that. And just, that ability to mine and cultivate out of your team those best ideas and allowing your team to respond and help you execute that strategy, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Gotcha. So you said that last piece in terms of what causes leaders to feel overwhelmed, unwanted identity, unrealistic expectations, and was that uncertainty and chaos?
Unrelenting chaos. Yeah.
Unrelenting chaos.
Where it doesn't end. Yeah.
Unrelenting chaos.
Hmm.
Speak to where, Ike, you talked about the changes that leaders feel that cause them to feel overwhelmed, but you also said change and challenges.
Hmm.
Speak a little bit to what leaders can do when they find themselves in the midst of a, different challenges of how they can de-stress and just
Yeah.
calm themselves so that they can be their best version for their team.
Okay. Um, One of the things that we do here at the summit is we take some of our leaders through a little book by Gary McIntosh called Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership. And in that book, he presents a process that he calls spiritual composting. um, I like that phrase because
That's
he's
good.
talking about we take all of our past experiences, all of our distortions, all of our failures, all of our mistakes, the less desirable aspects of our personality, and reintegrate them into our life rather than denying them or seeking to remove them from our
Mm,
life. We embrace our weaknesses, our failures, and allow the Holy Spirit to work in us and through us to begin composting all of those things into the spiritual humus, into the spiritual concrete from which our most powerful leadership will come. So it's embracing the journey, it's integrating where we courageously bring together all of the parts of ourselves, the past,
mm,
the present strengths and skills that we have, the future dreams and goals that are a part of our life, and we learn to integrate them so that we are both tough and tender.
that's good.
Um, we are scarred but brave,
Mm,
full of grace, but also full of grit. And as a leader, you know that you need all of those things. So
yeah.
that's one of the things that help with the overwhelming process, is to look back and see what my experience has been and how we've grown, both as an individual leader and as an organization that I'm leading.
Mm,
And then talk about that. Talk about, we've made some decisions before that have affected us that has not been real well. We've made some dumb choices, and own that process,
yeah.
because they already know you'd have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and one of the things I wanted to ask you was, it's painful to go back and look at those experiences. It's painful to look at the fact I dropped the ball. I was a bad leader. I made bad decisions. That was a part of my life I really wanted to just shut the door on, and I don't ever want to open that door again. But
No.
what I hear you saying is we need to embrace that. That's part of the journey, and it goes along with the grit and the grace that God is doing in our lives. Speak to having the courage to embrace that and why that's important.
Yeah, I think because, again, because we want to be perceived as competent leaders, we have a tendency to hide our mistakes.
Mm,
Um, and real effective leaders are those who are vulnerable and open about their life. Not everything. They don't need to be gullible and tell everybody every mistake you've ever made. But when it comes in terms of your life and how you affect others' lives, how you're inspiring, how you're encouraging other people, it's always helpful for them to know that you have a past where you've made some mistakes, or you've had failures, or you've had distortions about yourself.
yeah.
That always leads people that are under your influence as a leader to feel that they are normal too.
Oh, that's
And
so good.
yep,
That's so good. It reminds me of the verse where God says, in James, I believe it is, where he opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble.
yes,
And
yes,
and and when we're talking to leaders, one of the questions I think we always ask is, can this person relate to me? In other words, do they have hangups and hurts and things like that too in their past, like I have too? We don't relate to each other's strengths. We relate kind of really to each other's weaknesses. Would you agree with that?
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so good. I love that juxtaposition of, a tough and tender, being able to be both and
Mhm.
being able to be transparent. But what I heard you saying was really be strategically vulnerable. Don't be vulnerable about everything, but but be strategically vulnerable at times with your team so that they can relate to you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
And be open to allowing. Um, my belief is that God gave you the skills to be able to be a leader. Be open to allowing the Holy Spirit to project His part of the transformation process in your life, because that's what my belief as a pastor is, that God uses all things for our good.
Mm.
And so, as a leader, when we are integrating all of those things together, then it's a part, we strengthen everybody, including ourselves, when we do that.
I love it. Ike, as you as we finish up here, and I think this is a wonderful place to kind of land the plane. What's final words, final advice for that leader who is feeling overwhelmed right now? What is an immediate next step they could take right now to help themselves get in a better place?
As a therapist and as a counselor, we always encourage people to have a balanced view of life. When we're trying to control life, that's where it tends to lead us into more anxious, spinning, feeling overwhelmed. So, um, making an integral part of a lifestyle where you are resting, you are playing, you are recovering, and we need times of renewal and refreshment and regeneration. Understanding that as a leader, we call it the art of balance. Being able to lead in competence and be able to have renewing relaxation as you need it. Through the times of being overwhelming, take time off, um, rest, play. You need to
Yeah.
practice. God gave us the ability to do that. So there needs to be exercise and enjoyment. Um, so if you're overwhelmed, evaluate, first of all, what's going on. Why am I overwhelmed? What am I feeling? Is it part of those unwanted identity, unrealistic expectations, or unrelenting chaos? Evaluate it. Is that going on? Am I looking closely at everything in my life? Do I see everything working together? Um, and then taking care of ourselves, being a part of a process of rest, play, and recovery will help with every overwhelming experience.
Mm,
Sometimes, so let me put a little push in here too. Seek out assistance
yeah.
that people can provide understanding for you beyond your ability to be able to comprehend. It may be that you need to talk to a therapist. It may be that you need to gain a coach to bring some strategies into your life that can enhance your life and your leadership.
Mm. Ike, I love that. I love that phrase that you use, the art of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is an art, right? It takes a little bit to kind of figure out what works for you and what works for me and what works for others. It is an art that we must play with a little bit and give ourselves some grace and margin to figure out how we find rest in times that are those unrelenting chaotic times that you talk about. Dude, I just cannot thank you enough for your friendship and even mentorship in my life that you've been. And I think you've dropped some gold on us here in this conversation that I'm sure leaders that are listening to this is going to help them. Guys, thank y'all so much for watching and being a part of this conversation. Share this with your friends because I'm sure that it can be helpful. And Ike, I want to have you back on again real soon because I think there's some definite wisdom in here that we can all learn from. So thank you for helping us as we try to figure out how to lead when we are overwhelmed. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.